From a flightless simulator at Ferris Air to a momentous meeting in an alley to the complex mind of an architect to every far sector in space and to the brilliance of the central power battery on Oa. This is the podcast that covers the adventures of all of your favorite ring slingers. This is the Emerald Echo with your hosts, Adam and the Emerald Enthusiast.
Welcome to another episode of Emerald Echo, a Green Lantern podcast and vidcast. As always, I'm your host, Adam, and with me is my co-host, the Emerald Enthusiast himself, Donnie. Donnie, how's it going?
Hey, what's up, Lantern fans? It's the man whose ring runs on fanboy energy, the podcasting machine, the big nerd in green. It's the Emerald Enthusiast, and we're back with another episode of the Emerald Echo.
And we have a special guest this week, as the viewing audience can see. Donnie, why don't you go ahead and give him one of your patented introductions?
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, and all beings of the Omniverse, please welcome the writer of Teen Titans Academy and Alan Scott, the Green Lantern. He's the master of more than one universe. This is tenacious Tim Sheridan.
Woo! That was good.
Feel free to put that on your answering machine if you so choose. We'll clip it and send it to you.
I'll take it. That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much for that.
I always tell people I'm Samantha Irvin without the beauty. So
yeah, well,
I don't know. You're dressed, in a very beautiful way. I'm seeing the hat. I'm looking at that tie. All I see is beauty.
There you go. See,
I got a whole room full of Green Lantern collectibles behind me. So,
which I've been angling to steal for what? How long have we been doing this? 2 years now, Donnie?
No, we've been doing this for over 3 years. Remember, we hooked up at the very beginning of 2020. So 3.5 years.
I have no concept of time, clearly.
Especially since it was 2020. Time means nothing for those
that year happened.
Years. Yeah, it's bizarre.
That was the thing. Yeah. Okay, that's good. That's good to know. Thank you, Tim, for coming on. We are massive fans of both your comic book work and your film work in the animated space that we've seen. We talked about it off air quite a bit of them, and I guess we'll mention them throughout the show here. But again, we thank you for coming on, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
God, I'm just so happy you invited me. Thank you. This is gonna be great. Let's get into it.
All right, Donnie, take it away.
Okay, first question here, sir.
Oh my
By
God.
the way, again, thank you for being on here. I've watched so many podcasts and watch you on so many videos over the years. This is
I'm overexposed.
Me, so
is
thank
what
you
you're
so
saying.
much.
I'm way overexposed, and I get it. It's true.
You're very entertaining. So let me ask you this question. When did you first conceptualize this story about Alan Scott?
Oh, wow. There's a lot of ways to answer that. Because speaking generally in terms of the themes and the concepts and, some of the stuff that's in this story is stuff that I have been conceptualizing for my entire life. Some of it is there's so much about this book that's personal. It's very personal. And so it's hard to sort of, pinpoint exactly where those concepts and ideas sort of, came from originally. However, perhaps the answer you're looking for is, we started work on this coming out of, I co-wrote a book with Jeff Johns and Jeremy Adams called Flashpoint Beyond.
Love that.
And so so Jeremy and I have been friends for years. Before we started working in comics, we met working in television and animation together. And we came to comics to DC at the same time. And we had an idea for a story that we pitched that would have been kind of a backdoor to a crisis level event at DC, but that the idea was to have our sort of C-level heroes work to avert that crisis from ever happening, right? And so in order to pitch it, we had to get, for a shorthand, we had to give it put a name to the crisis. And the easiest one for us in terms of the story we wanted to tell was to say Flashpoint, that we're going to avoid returning to, the Flashpoint universe. That was the idea. And I'm probably saying too much. Jeremy's going to be so mad because we didn't tell this story ultimately, and I think we still have hopes and dreams that we get to tell it someday. So when we pitched it, and when DC was really excited about it, and they said, let's go. Like, we want to do, like, it was going to be like weekly. It was going to be like 6 issues weekly or something like that. And I said, "Whoa!" And they were like, "We're gonna frame it as the sequel to Flashpoint." And we were like, "Wait, what?" And they get very excited. And I said, Jeremy and I were thinking, I was like, I don't feel comfortable just coming in and writing a sequel to Flashpoint without getting a blessing from Jeff Johns, who, by the way, neither Jeremy nor I had ever met or knew at that. We were just fans of his. And so our editor at DC said, yeah, we'll fine. We'll call Jeff. So our editor called Jeff. And as the story was told to us, Jeff said, it's great. I love it. Let's do it. And he said, in fact, I want to write issue 0 to kick it off for these guys.
Awesome.
We were like,
That's
what?
great.
And then he's like, and let's all go get lunch. So
Wow.
here's Jeremy and I rolling up to the restaurant, just like, what is happening? And we sit down, and Jeff comes in, and of course, instantly, we're just all friends. Like, we're old friends, like we've known each other forever. He is just like the greatest person to talk to. Such a fan of comics is the way he comes off the first time you meet him. Not even someone who has created some of the biggest and most important stories in comics of all time. And halfway through the lunch, he's like, you know what? I don't want to just write issue 0. I want us to all co-write this together. We'll get together, we'll meet, we'll have a big whiteboard, and we'll just work it all out, and we'll do it together. And Jeremy and I are like, so we get a front row seat to a masterclass in writing comics, and we're getting paid for it. It's not, we're not paying to do this, and we're fairly new at DC at this point, and in comics. So we're like, yeah, we'll do that, sure. So we did, and we threw out the story that Jeremy and I had come up with, and the 3 of us came up with a whole new story that's completely different than what the other thing was. We had the greatest time. I mean, we just had a great time. It was the 3 of us would get together, sit in the office, talk about stuff. We'd hear Jeff's reactions to things that would kind of teach us sort of like what, he was really good about keeping us on track and focused on, what's the heart of this thing. I mean, there were roads we went down and we were going to go down that we were convinced we knew what that story was. And at one day, Jeff came in and he said, I think we should start over, because I think we haven't found the heart of this, or we haven't stayed true to what the heart of it is. And I was like, all right, let's do it. So we threw that all out and we started over again. And
you got any of that left? Can you send it to me?
I do have a lot of it, actually. I wrote a whole outline for issue 2 that ends up being, it's totally moot. We didn't do any of that story. And issue 3, all of it changed. Everything after issue 1 changed at one point. But and some of the art is residual from, like, some of the covers are like concept art that was done for the original version of that story that we were talking about doing. So some of the concept art that Zermanico did doesn't quite fit the story, but it's cool. It's beautiful because it's Zermanico.
Yeah, he's
Zermanico.
great.
I just
whatever he does, just put it out there.
It's great.
Yeah. So anyway, so out of Flashpoint Beyond, that's where Jeff had this idea for the new golden age. And we weren't a part of the pitch. He pitched to DC this thing that would come out of, you saw a reference to the Red Lantern in Flash at the end of Flashpoint Beyond, and many other things. And so DC eventually greenlighted 3 new Golden Age books, and those are the ones that we've gotten: the Wesley Dodds book, the Jay Garrick book, and the Alan Scott book. And throughout that process, and then when it officially got picked up, Jeff had, kept us informed, and then he called me when it got approved, and he said, I think you've got an Alan Scott story to tell, like, in the 1940s when he was, as we know now, a closeted gay superhero.
Yeah.
What is that going to look like? And we started chatting about it a little bit on the phone, and it was when we cracked the nut of the Red Lantern that it all started falling into place for me. Now, if people haven't read the story, mild spoilers right now. Well, actually, huge spoilers if you haven't read the story. If you've
So
read the
pause
story,
this and then come back after you've read it.
come back after you've read it, or skip ahead, or well, I don't know.
Yeah.
No,
But
go buy the comics.
Yeah,
All of
read
you.
the book and then come back. We're going to be
if you can find
sticklers on
them,
this.
they sell out
Good
all
news
over the
is
place, which
digital
great.
is available, folks. If you can't find it,
It's
you can buy it
true.
digitally.
You can find it digitally.
It's
You know who's got every
2024.
issue? You know who's got every issue and a bunch of the variant covers? This guy right here.
That's why people can't find them. You took them all.
So we were talking about the Red Lantern being the Soviet Union's answer to the Green Lantern. And that was really cool. And then we were thinking about it, and I thought, well, the thing I know best about Alan Scott is that for some reason he marries his villains. I don't know what that's about, but he's got a type. So I said, well, that's what it should be. It should be that this was someone who he had a very close relationship with. What today, would be that they were married, if that had been something you could do then.
Right.
And then let's tell, what the story of that and why that didn't work out and what it all means, and sort of give them that connection, that deep personal connection, but also call that connection into question, because they are connected, these two men, by this cosmic force, this thing that is beyond human comprehension. So what does that mean for them and their relationship? And they have a lot of questions about it. And once the complexity of that started to sink in for me, I was like, well, that's a story I want to tell, and I have to tell. I really want to do that.
Right.
So that was it. I pitched them. I wrote a 6-page outline for the 6-issue book, and everybody was like, let's go. There was
Awesome.
there was no real, they didn't give me any real pushback or notes or anything at the beginning of it. And then when I started scripting it is when Andrew Marino and Marquis Draper said, they had some suggestions about the structure of the first few issues and how I had conceived it versus how I think I had conceived it more like a graphic novel. And they were thinking, well, if it's monthly, we want to do, things, you might want to think about doing these things a little bit differently. And so I ended up kind of shuffling around how the first 3 issues would work. And it turned out it was good. It meant that there was time jumps that happened, which I can't stand. And I was trying to avoid going back and forth between eras, but it's sort of impossible to avoid with Alan, in being in the 1940s. We want to see him as Green Lantern, but we also needed some context from before he was Green Lantern. And then there's also the question of where he is today and what's happening with him in the present. So, it ended up being an occupational hazard. I was going to have to deal with time jumps no matter
What's funny is you say you don't like, you're not a fan of time jumps, but I think we've, in our reviews for the book so far, have complimented that story structure. Like, we actually enjoyed it. We're like, that's pretty cool.
This is why this, credit for that must go to the editors, because they were the ones who said, no, this'll work. And I was like, oh, I'm so scared.
It's working.
We did, yeah. We did okay.
And I'm glad to hear that it's selling really well, because that's my hope. My secret hope is, because I know Jeff is off doing his own imprint now. My secret hope is that they won't just put the JSA back on the shelf when he's done his 12 issues, and I hope they'll let either you or Jeremy take over the book. That's my
Well,
hope.
nobody has talked to me about that. I think, in fact, from what I've heard, I think they do. I think they have a plan for JSA.
Okay, I'm glad, because
Doesn't
it would
doesn't
suck
involve
for them
me.
to, right, but it would suck for them to put those characters on the shelf.
Yeah, I think so
That,
too. In fact,
yeah,
I think especially, and after you read issue 6, the final issue of Alan Scott, you
Can't wait.
know, you saw the setup at the end of issue 5. The JSA has arrived on the scene. You saw it at the end of the Wesley Dodds book. The
right.
JSA is formed. You know, our story takes place after the Wesley Dodds story.
Okay.
But so now we basically have set up, you know, the golden age JSA again.
Right.
And boy, I would love if DC would do, even if it's just another 6-issue mini, like do a JSA, you know, during World War II, or, you know, and then if people like that, do one set in the Red Scare, because that's a very important time for the
Right.
JSA. That'd be fun to look at those stories through a modern lens,
Right.
which is that was the whole thing that we're doing with Alan Scott. You know, I felt like it was important to not upend his whole story, to try to keep as much of what was canon in the golden age, certainly, and then some of the more important things that have come out over the years. But you know, but to look at it and re-examine it through a modern eye, and give it a little bit more layer, a little, you know, a few more layers, a little bit more context. That's what I get excited about. You
Right.
know, it's like, if you read, you know, All American number 16, you know, his first issue, his origin story, you know, that was, and if you read like issue 2 of my Alan Scott book, it's, you know, there's a real deep connection between them. I mean,
Right.
I tried to root it as much as I could in the original story.
In that,
And
yeah.
then as the series has progressed, as the 6 issues have progressed, I've been introducing concepts that have sort of come out, that have stayed as
Right.
a, you know, part of the character, part of the lore. There's a whole thing in issue 5. There's like one page. Unfortunately, I've only got 20 pages an issue.
Right.
And it's only 6 issues. So it means that sometimes, a lot of times, there's a lot of balloons and there's a lot of stuff to get through. And like that, there's this one page in issue 5, which is the lore page, where it's like,
Oh boy.
here you go. Here's how it works. I hope this is enough to get you going on your journey with Alan Scott. Like, it's, you know, you want to know how his powers work and why, here you go. But now let's move on, because we got a
Right.
story to tell.
Right. Right.
I don't want to,
would like to
dwell on
compliment you, by the way, on the dialogue for Doiby Dickles.
Oh yeah.
The way that you capture the way that he's supposed to talk, the way that he
Yeah.
sounds.
It drives me nuts when
Incredible.
people don't write him phonetically with like
Right.
that Brooklynese thing that he
Yeah.
does, even though he was from Gotham.
I've always remembered, like, the way he talks. I can hear him in my head when I
Me too.
read him. And
Me too.
so
When
yeah.
people don't do it, when they just write his dialogue regularly, I just
Yeah.
am like, what is this? This is not Doiby Dickles, you know? I don't know who this is. So yeah, so thank you for that. I just I really felt like it was important to do that. I wish we could have spent a lot more time with Doiby.
Right.
We set him up in a way that you have to know that he's an important presence in Alan's life. And he certainly, you know, comes in and has a major role to play in issue 5 in his own way. And so, you know, you'll know that when other people come in to write these characters and tell these stories, that they have these tools available to them. They're sitting
Right.
there in the toolbox now. They know that, you know, Doiby is a trusted confidant who knows everything about Alan, and the Green Lantern. And that ends up being a very important tool that you have when you're writing one of these stories. Alan needed somebody to be able to talk to,
Right.
you know, about stuff that, you know, he's dealing with the fact that his secret identity has a secret identity. And so with all that, with the inception levels of secrets for him, he's got to have somebody he can talk to. Otherwise, it's all inner monologue. And
Right.
while that is can be true to life, I just can't resist writing Doiby Dickles. I mean, he's just I would rather do it as conversation with Doiby than in inner monologue because
Right.
I
Yeah, it
love
makes
Doiby, you know?
it's fun. Yeah, it's more fun
Yeah.
that way. Speaking of that character, it kind of ties into my next question, which is in regards to the time period. How much research did you do into that period, and what kinds of research did you do into that period for the story?
I mean, it's not like I had of a have done like had a lot of interest and had done a lot of research prior to this book in that particular era.
Mm-hmm.
And I also didn't read a ton of Golden Age comics. Um, I have read them, but Golden Age comics are a different animal. It's a different muscle for for fans, to read those stories.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they're important, but a lot of them sound the same. The heroes all kind of sound the same. The stories look the same, and they're very simple because they were written for kids, you
Right.
know, which I don't think you have to simplify things for kids, but that's what they did. Um, and but in relation to the period, it wasn't like I had some, vast knowledge of it. So I did do research. The beauty of the world that we live in today is
Mm-hmm.
that, if I had to write this story 30 years ago, I guess more than I guess 30 or 30 years ago, um, it would have been much harder for me to get the period stuff right. But now everything's available to you online 24 hours a day. So whenever I had questions or thoughts, I mean, the answer honestly to your question is painstakingly, like painstaking amount of research has gone into this book, not just on my part, but on Kian's part as well. Kian is somebody who has a real good working knowledge of history of American history. He's an Irishman. He lives in Europe, but he's very, he knows a lot about American history. And in fact, it was him who suggested fleshing out a line that I wrote in the outline, which just referenced J. Edgar Hoover. And he's like, that should be a scene. Like, you should actually do this. And he should be blackmailing him. And I was like, oh my God, you're right. And I was like, thank you, Kian, Um, so so yeah, but every single issue, like there's stuff in issue two, and no, actually the beginning of issue well, certainly in issue two, about the kinds of the sort of treatment, quote unquote, that queer people were subjected to
Yes.
during that era. And then in issue three, we meet some characters. Alan goes to the docks or to the piers in Chelsea to get some information and to investigate these murders that are being done in a way that implicate him. And all of that is historically as accurate as I could get it and as Kian could get it, because this is where these men would congregate, would gather, would meet each other in order to, feel like they had a connection with each other. And they couldn't, there weren't necessarily, bars that they could even go to. There
Right.
probably were some underground places, especially in a big city like New York. But it was one of the things that made me so sad is a lot of people looked at that stuff, and some of the opportunists online who are looking to make people angry and monetize clicks. They were like, oh, Alan's hiring prostitutes. I was like,
No.
I understand why you think that. I do, because there's a trope in movies about, the dock worker, the people over by the docks and the streetwalkers, or,
Yeah.
I get that. But it's important for me because to express it accurately, because I'm trying as much as I can in the middle of a big important superhero origin story and supervillain origin story to also tell you a little bit about me, about my community, and about our history.
Right.
There are things that are in this book that I don't think a lot of people know about the queer experience in America. And so this is an opportunity for me to say, here's some things about us. Here are some things that you can learn about us. And so for me, it was very important to get that stuff right. And so this was not there was no money changing hands
Right.
down
Yeah.
at the piers. It's not
No,
that's not what's
we
going
know
on.
what was behind that. Those people that are online
Yeah.
like blaming
And
you about things like that. It's
But
all
a
about
lot of
bigotry.
people don't do their research and they hear that stuff and it's convincing to them, and I understand that. I do. But there's so much cynicism that leads people to believe that stuff, that when they hear those things, they believe it. And but that's not how we've approached the story. We try to approach it without that level of cynicism, and to just matter of factly tell you, hey, here are some things. And by the way, that's not the most important part of the story, but it's there and it's accurate, as it's as historically accurate as we can make it, which is not something that anybody asked us to do. It's just that I feel like if you're going to do it, why not do it right
go
and in
on
a
in.
way
Yeah.
that tells you it tells the truth. I
Yeah.
just think what our job is as storytellers is to tell the truth.
Yeah.
And I think people can smell a lie a mile away, and they don't engage with the material. I think the reason why people have engaged with this story, and people who have, who are not LGBTQIA plus, who maybe don't even have a lot of experience with LGBT people,
Yeah.
have responded to this book and are really enjoying this story. And I think that's because you can't help but respond to honesty. When somebody's telling you a story and it's truthful, you can't help but not listen.
Before Donnie gets into his next question, I will say that, first of all, with the whole time period research, the research is paying off, because Donnie and I, in one of our reviews, said that two things. It's one of two things. Either you did a lot of research, which now you're confirming. Our other theory was, or he's a time traveler, which was the more fun theory. But that's how
No,
good
that's
the research is.
That's Alan, according
Yeah,
to
yeah,
Vladimir.
yeah.
According to Vladimir, that's Alan.
And the other thing you said, people that you're trying to make people aware of the community that aren't part of the community. I'm not part of the community, and neither is Donnie. But this story has really shed some light on all that, and I think when we talked about how they had to do stuff back then so clandestinely and so under the
Well,
radar,
Adam,
it made me emotional reading that. I'm like, I
Adam,
felt
I'm going to
so.
make you emotional. I'm going to make you even more emotional right now, because there's another piece of this, which is it's not only important for me to tell the truth and give you an accurate representation of this community, but what you're looking at in an historical context is still happening
Oh
today,
yeah,
all over the world.
Yeah.
And so the stuff that you're reading about that's maybe making you feel something and making you feel some empathy or making you understand some people better, you're not just understanding people in the 1940s better. This is the
Yeah.
experience that we have still today. Have things gotten better? Yes, in many places they have.
But not
But
everywhere.
not everywhere. And there are
Yeah.
still other challenges that have arisen too since then. But there are terrible atrocities happening all over the world from people who just, to people who are just living their lives, being
Yeah.
who they are. They didn't choose to be the way they are. And if they could, they wouldn't, because they wouldn't want to face this. And
Right.
it's part of the lesson, part of the thing that Alan is learning. These are the things he's going through, are things that I went through, in the 90s. And, when I was a kid growing up, thinking about this stuff, understanding who I was, that's 50 years after this
That's insane.
story
Yeah.
takes place. And yet I was terrorized and terrified. And kids are still today too. And not just kids, Alan
Adults.
doesn't come out of the closet until he's an old man
Yeah.
in this story, in this universe. And it was really important to me. People will say, oh, it's a retcon. And I'm like, well, people come out of the closet late in life all the time.
Right.
Sometimes they didn't even know. It
Right.
took them this long to figure it out sometimes. And they deserve to have their stories told. They deserve to be represented everywhere, especially in comics, which has a huge, roster of characters that can represent anyone.
Right.
And so like, let it, these are you. What I always say is, when your grandfather or your uncle comes out of the closet, you don't scream retcon in his face. I hope,
I hope not.
because if no other reason, it's stupid. It sounds dumb if you yell
Yeah.
retcon at him. But that's that to me. That's
You
what.
don't get to choose someone else's identity for them.
Right.
No,
I
and
wish the world
look,
understood that.
and some people, and it happens too. People will come out of the closet late in life, and folks who are their family members or their friends will feel like they've been lied to. And sometimes they have been. And you can make amends for that, but also you have to understand, why did they lie to you? And what were they they were scared, and what were they scared of?
Right.
Some of the things, some of the events that you see in this book even will point you in the direction of understanding the things that we're scared of. And it's hopefully things like this get people to look at other people with a little bit more understanding and a little bit more empathy. And we don't get there unless we tell our stories and we
Right.
listen to each other's stories. We all have to do that. And that was a big motivator for me to do this book, and why, excuse me, I'm talking so much. I'm choking over here. It was so important to me to do it because there are a lot in mainstream comics, there's a lot of queer representation nowadays, but a lot of times it comes during June, during Pride Month,
Yeah.
and the stories are written for queer people. And so they tend to be very upbeat and positive and reinforcing a level of hope. And those stories are important and they're great, especially for queer readers. But queer stories are not just our story. My story is not just for queer people. It's for everyone.
Right.
We should all know each other's stories. And it was important for me to show you kind of, the bad sides and the good sides. And Alan presented a unique opportunity with that, because it's a story to me, and it's always been a story about a man coming out of the darkness into the light and then becoming a beacon of that light for the whole world. And there are very clear reasons why he was living in with a level of darkness early in his life, and how that, these 6 issues are the story of how that changes for him and how his whole world changes. It's a love story ultimately,
Yeah.
and love, for better or worse, changes us. That's love and light.
Well, I just want to say, when Adam and I started this podcast, I made it clear to him, and he echoed my sentiments. I was like, if we do this, I want to make sure that this is for everybody, that everybody has a chance to enjoy comics, get their story told. I'm like, I don't want to be one of these, edgelord people who's out there online criticizing everything and bigoted. I'm like, that's not who I am. And so
I mean,
for you to come on and be able to be a part of this, I mean, we're incredibly honored for you to be able to tell this story and tell part of your story with us.
Thank you. But can I tell you, when we kicked off working on this book, I sent an email to the entire team, the editors and everyone who was involved at that point. And it was probably way too long because I was just kind of gushing a little bit. But the point of the email was, I was saying thank you because these were, as I see them, a group of allies. And we don't get to tell our stories in mainstream media without allies who are there to help us lift up our voices and to lift them up for us too in some cases. And I feel like that's what Jeff, when he pitched doing these books, and what the basic concept would be for Alan Scott, meaning that it would be about him being a closeted hero in the 40s. And Andrew Marino and the whole team at DC, and everybody who greenlighted the book. I just feel like we don't get anywhere without people helping lift up our voices, and those voices we should all be heard. Because like I said, we all get better when we listen and to each other's stories, when we tell them unabashedly, warts and all, we tell the stories. and we learn a little something, hopefully, about each other. What is the point otherwise of doing this? Yeah, superhero stories that are just very thin, that are punching and explosions
Yeah.
and universes ending, and like those are really fun and they're
Yeah.
really cool. But we've read them already.
Yeah.
They're out there. Like there's a lot of them. They're not anything new. They can be fun and a diversion, yes, but I just think storytelling, if we're going to have those kinds of things, we can also have
Right.
something a little bit meatier that tells us something about ourselves and the world. Queer people read Alan Scott, and a lot of queer people I know have read it and seen themselves in it.
Yeah.
And hopefully, people who are not part of the queer community are reading it and can see themselves in it. And the whole goal is to take in stories and appreciate and understand and identify with the stuff that you can identify with, and to hear the stuff that you can't identify with, maybe see if there's something about it you can identify with, but then if it's something that's not essential to you, you don't listen to that part of it. You pay attention to the stuff that you do connect with. There's a lot of stuff for everybody, especially in comics.
Well, and with Green Lantern, there's a long history of social commentary.
Well, yeah.
So, I mean,
Are you sure it's not a retcon, Donnie? Are you sure?
All comics have always been social commentary.
Because the internet screams retcon, but
retcon. By the way, there's nothing wrong with a retcon. Retcon is not a dirty word. People are trying to make it a dirty word, but there's nothing wrong with it by its strict definition.
Yeah.
In fact, sometimes it can make things better. I think one of the things I've learned, one of the things I've learned from Jeff, just from reading Jeff over the years, is, he's always been good about, what you would technically call retcons, but he's gone back and made connections between things in the DC universe that people didn't connect before, but that makes sense and enrich the story and make you feel like it was all designed this way from the beginning. Sometimes maybe it was in some cases, but it takes a writer like Jeff to come in and illuminate it for you. And so that's one of the things that, that I absolutely am crazy about. And I'm trying to do some of that in this story as much as I can. But yeah, I don't even know what question we're answering at this point, but let me say,
I've got another one for you.
Well, yeah, you've
ton
kind
of
of
research,
into,
of research, conceptualized it all my whole life.
Okay.
Let's see what else you got.
Okay, well, before I ask you this next question, I want to compliment you on the Alan Scott shelf behind you. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, I see the Funko there, the statue.
Yeah, some of this stuff.
The light up lantern, yeah.
This guy was mine.
That's DC Direct, right?
Yes, that's the DC Direct. I picked this up. This is mine. This ring was made for me, designed and crafted by friends of mine. Oh, there we go. Friends of mine a friend of mine who's a cosplayer. They also made me a cape, an Alan Scott cape. And some of these things were gifts. These over here were gifts from my friends Jason Inman and Ashley Robinson.
Yes.
And this was given to me by a friend of mine who works at DC. So it was kind of like I started collecting things. There's a issue 5 back there. Some stuff you can't see all of it. Like the shelf above that has all my Long Halloween and Reign of the Superman action figures. Because I worked on those and I wanted to have lifelong action figure. And then of course my Motu stuff is all behind me. Masters of the Universe.
Oh, I love it. Yeah.
Back here. And there's the book that I did for Revelation,
which I have. I showed him off air that
I know.
I have mine. I read it. I reread it.
We could do a whole other podcast on what's behind
you. Maybe what we'll do is we'll have him come back and talk Motu on a separate episode. See,
don't forget Transformers over here, which is I worked on a Netflix show for Transformers.
I remember that one too. See,
yeah. I
So-
try to surround myself with some of the toys I've gotten to
So
play
you're
with
saying you took
on
those jobs
screen.
just for the toys? That's what you're saying.
Well, you know what? Actually, to be honest, the only time anybody's ever like, I've worked on a bunch of stuff, but the only time there was a couple of Masters of the Universe things that they sent me, but but Transformers, Hasbro sent me a huge box at Christmas time, right before Kingdom came out, and it was like, Merry Christmas to me! Like I was so excited. There was a bunch of stuff in there. I wish they would do more of that. Send me toys. I'll be your best friend, you know?
So if you want to hire Tim, just send him toys.
Yeah, seriously.
It'll start the conversation.
I am an easy, cheap date. Are you kidding?
By the way, I also want to say I was very flattered. You sent me a message one time, said you'd watched one of my reviews on YouTube, and you're like, "Yeah, you've got a great voice, and I really liked your review." And I'm like, "Okay, breathe, breathe, breathe." All right.
Yeah,
I appreciate the
I think
compliment.
also I'm pretty sure the way that I framed it too was I was like, "That's your voice." Like
Yeah.
I was like,
Actually, yeah, it was, and I was like, "Yeah."
I was like,
So-
"You've got the greatest voice."
That's why I contacted him about this show, because I had always wanted to be doing, I always wanted to do a Green Lantern show.
Yeah.
And then I saw one of his action figure reviews. I'm like, I think he'd be a good co-host. And then I hit him up, and sure enough, he said yes.
I wish that I had the dulcet tones
Yeah.
of the Emerald Enthusiast.
Well, thank you. But now there's a trade-off because Adam has to endure my dad jokes. So
Well, that's
that's
fine. I'll take the
Yeah,
dad
that's
jokes.
true.
I'll take the dad jokes.
yeah, that's it. Hey, for instance, since we're talking about various things like that, do you know in the Star Wars universe what the Jawas can have, what they can make that no other species in the whole Star Wars universe can make?
What's that?
Jawa poop.
Baby Jawas.
Oh,
Okay.
no,
So
I was along the same lines. I went with Jawa poop. You went with the
Anyway.
much cleaner and nicer Jawa babies.
Yeah, you went to the sanitized version.
To be honest, you don't know that. You don't know that that's how they. You don't know. Have we ever seen a Jawa baby?
I don't even think we've ever seen the Jawas without their hoods on and stuff.
That's right.
It's kind of like kind of like Orko, right?
Yeah, they remind me of Orko. They do. Yeah.
We do know that there's male and female though, because Tika's a female.
Oh, right. So then do you think then that this naturally leads to a Disney Plus series like Jawa Babies?
I mean, maybe. I mean, at this,
Da, da, da.
how much did the toy sales for Baby Yoda do? That'll tell you the answer right there.
It's true. It's all going to be all babies now.
Yeah. I'm surprised it hasn't started already.
You know what?
should-
If Grogu had a friend who was a Jawa, a baby who was a Jawa, that would be a moneymaker.
I would just say a little baby in a little baby hood with little just completely blacked out face, like it would be really funny. Just a little tiny Jawa. It'd be really cute.
Exactly.
I feel
The only
like
thing you can say is Utini.
someone should do that though as a joke in the next Star Wars series, where like there's an episode where they have to protect a very important baby, and it turns out it's like a Jawa baby. And they're not even really that important.
That would be funny. That would be good.
Okay, well let's turn the dial back to something serious here, because you had said something about this earlier, and I got us off on a tangent again because I do weird stuff like that. But
I was serious about the Jawa babies. I'm pitching that to Disney Plus.
one of the aspects of Alan's development in this story is reconciling his faith with his sexual orientation. What was your thought process as you tackled such a complex, deep subject?
Well, my thought process was, am I going to do this? It's obviously that's always very dangerous territory, but it goes back to what I was saying earlier about if I'm going to do this, we're going to be honest and we're going to tell you as much of the story as we can. And it's almost inconceivable to think that someone in the 1930s would be presented with the question of being homosexual, and from the guy from the Midwest, growing up, probably like everybody went to church on Sunday. it's inconceivable that the question wouldn't come up for him to say, how does this meet with what the church, what I understand from the church? And um and so I said, well, we're going to have to go there. So I brought it up right at the beginning, and then, but I wasn't really sure how I was going to resolve it when we first started. And then there was in issue 3, there was it was going to be this sort of buddy cop, investigation that would have been between Alan and Jay Garrick, uh, and sort of be the beginnings of what will become a very important friendship between the two of them. As we know, over the course of their lives. And once I got there, I said, everybody knows about Jay and Alan. I'm not going to be really telling you anything new. And what makes more sense is to bring in someone who is a police detective for doing an investigation, and who has access to an understanding of criminals and the police, and who is potential, who can stand in as a voice, an extension of the voice of God, and that is Jim Corrigan, the Golden Age Spectre. It was sort of like when it occurred to me, I was like, well, God, of course, like we have to go there. And Ostrander's book in the 90s had an issue in which Jim Corrigan as the Spectre, and this takes place 50 years after my story, he deals with his own homophobia, essentially. And he's trying to understand his mission as the Spectre versus what his personal views are and what he's thinking in terms of gay people. And he goes to goes to Michael and basically kind of like says, well, what shouldn't I be going after these gay people? Aren't they violating, God's laws? Or I forget how he puts it, but but what Michael tells him is essentially what the Spectre tells Alan in issue 3, which is, your work, Spectre, is reserved for heinous criminals, murderers, and the worst humans. It does not extend to the people that you're asking about. And so Spectre has to kind of figure out like how to move on from what he felt were his beliefs and his thoughts, and he has a kind of a new way of approaching it now. It was a very interesting, should have been extremely controversial comic. I don't remember when it came out, but a really important for the time way of looking at that issue. Basically, leave them alone. These people are not criminals, basically, is what the book is telling you. And so in some sense, canonically, you think, well, why is it that 50 years from now he doesn't know that and he learns it? And so shouldn't he be a raging homophobe in 1941? And the way I wanted to sort of approach that was, this takes place in early 1941, and if you look back at the history, Jim Corrigan dies and becomes the Spectre a mere months before this exchange with Alan. And the way I look at it, it's like when you're new on the job and you just read the manual and you're doing everything right. And 50 years go by, and the battle between Jim Corrigan and the Spectre Force has gone different ways, and maybe there's more Jim Corrigan 50 years from now, but it's more the Spectre talking to him in the Spectre Force talking to him in my issue 3, versus later on it's more Jim Corrigan and his beliefs and what he thinks are his beliefs later on. So I felt like, well, there's a lot of room for that. Like we can sort of play around with it. He even says to Alan, look, I only recently died and became an agent of the Almighty. I'm, you're not the only one with having an identity crisis right now. So, which to me was an argument for why we should do a Spectre miniseries. Like,
I'd read it.
I'm like, let's see
I'd read
Spectre
that.
warring Jim Corrigan Spectre Force, trying to figure out how to do this job, having just gotten on the scene in in the Justice Society, just,
Yeah.
forms right then. He's like, he immediately becomes part of this super team, and yet his powers are so beyond everyone else, and he's on another realm of existence. There's a lot of stuff you can play around with. So, and it's not fun if he's like just the stoic Spectre who knows
Right.
everything.
Yeah.
I love the idea that he's like Doctor Who when he regenerates, where it's like he's not quite done yet for the first
Yeah.
couple of episodes. He hasn't quite figured out his identity. Like, it's these warring pieces of himself. But the advice he gives to Alan is good advice as far as I'm concerned, but also because it is what ultimately we learned in Ostrander's book in the 90s is the philosophy of heaven on this, and DC's version of God.
Right.
What DC's God believes. Now, it's very complicated because it's like, is DC's God the God of the Bible and of your religion or your church or whatever? I don't think so. I think that, DC has a God, and that story has evolved how it's evolved in fiction. I mean, that's a fictional universe. So there's room for, for interpretation and all that stuff, I think.
All I can tell you is the way I reconcile my sort of being open, to the community and being a Christian Catholic is there's some, I can still have my beliefs, I can still pray, I can still do all that jazz, and not agree with some of the stuff the church tells me. It's like,
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, cool, you do your thing, and it's like, I
You know
don't
what's
agree,
funny,
so
Adam?
let's just move on.
That's exactly who my dad was.
Yeah.
My dad was a devout Christian, but was never devoted to a particular church.
Yeah.
My dad could be seen any given Sunday at a different church in town, and I mean wildly different churches, because he went to do the thing that I was telling you about when we read comics, which is he would go and he would hear the stuff that he
Yeah.
identified with and that he needed in that that day from that sermon,
Yeah.
and and then he would kind of get
Toss
rid
what
of
didn't apply.
let
Yeah,
the other stuff
exactly.
wash
Yeah,
over
yeah.
him that he didn't
Yeah.
really care about or agree with,
Yeah.
and then he would, next week he'd go to the next one. And
Yeah.
I love I love that version of devotion, where his devotion is to his own journey
Yeah.
with his religion and his beliefs, and not a devotion to someone else's idea of what he should be and what he shouldn't.
Right. Yeah.
So it was like picking and choosing,
Exactly. Pick
what
your
he
adventure
appeared
this week. Exactly. Yeah.
all the best stuff, and he was damn happy
Yeah.
doing it, and it made
That's
his
the way
life
to do it.
better. So
It's the way to
I
do it.
yeah, so I think there's I think you're right. I don't know. I mean, I'm not particularly devout, so
Well, I wouldn't call myself the. I think calling me devout would be a
the other thing
misinterpretation. But
the other thing my dad did was, when I was when I was a kid, he gave me the option one day. I would go to church. We were going to at one point for a short period of time, we were going to an Episcopal church every Sunday. And when I was a kid, one day he's like, "Look, if this isn't working for you, and if you don't want to go, you don't have to."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay." And so I didn't go. And then sometimes I would, but mostly he left it up to me to decide, which I think is,
Smart,
thank God,
which
or
is smart.
whoever. Because
I really appreciate
what I did.
how-
I ended up spending that time in libraries,
Yeah.
and that was my church.
I really appreciated how comforting the Spectre was, because I've always heard that one person to whom you may come out to, who is affirming, that person can be powerful in making someone who's LGBTQIA plus feel, human and accepted, and how huge that can be. And that conversation was really powerful to see the Spectre say, "I know who you are, and you're not this bad person that you think you are."
Yeah.
And that you're grappling with.
Yeah. I mean, he's essentially saying, unlearn what you've learned. It's kind of what he gets told 50 years from now when he loses sight of it. unlearn what you think you've learned, go back to basics. I can speak with some authority on this, you know, and you go live your life. It's essentially what he's saying. Which as you know, that's personally, I think is a much better way to live. So
Yeah, I know.
Alan needed that though in the story. Like I needed to put that to bed. Alan needed to feel like, okay, who I am is not a violation of everything I believe morally. And, even if there are people in the world who will still believe that. Um, it's part of his journey of self-acceptance. I mean, look, this story, the biggest, I would say, part of the darkness that Alan is emerging from in this story is his own, I don't want to say it's not hatred, but it's his own the questioning of himself, the 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 feeling that he has that he's wrong and he shouldn't be who he is. And so that's the most consuming part, I think, of the darkness for him. And Spectre's words help light the way and lift him out of that. And that's, because I just, I think you can't do it yourself. You're never going to get there on your own. And if it's specifically, and it doesn't even have to be about coming out of the closet, but for me, that was my story. Like, coming out of the closet was a thing where I tried to sort of grapple with my identity on my own.
Mhm.
But it wasn't until I shared who I was with trusted confidants that I began to become comfortable in understanding that it was not wrong, and that I was, that I could be who I am. I could still be who I thought I was. And those are things that a lot of gay people go through. And I think a lot of people who are grappling with any particular part of their identity go through. So Spectre sets up the idea that, look, when we start this book, the first scene is all about the scene with J. Edgar Hoover is all about Alan saying, yeah, I know you organized, you wanted to have this Justice Society be a thing. And I told you could put my name on the letterhead, but I do better on my own. And that is motivated by Alan's fears about, like, when he was part of a team in the Army Corps of Engineers, he feels like he screwed it all up and got a lot of people. He got Johnny killed.
Yeah.
That's what he feels like. And so he has a natural disposition to avoid teams because he's worried about what his involvement in a team will do. He feels like, I need to go it alone, which is something that a lot of us go through, especially when we're dealing with our identity, is if I close everybody else out, if I just stay in my own cocoon, I can protect myself and them. And that's something that he's going through. But what he's learning, and part of him, that's the darkness, by the way, and what he's enclosed himself in it. And he's learning that it's not something that he has to go through on his own, his understanding of himself and his acceptance of himself. It is something that there are, along the way, he will find people who will love him and who will treat him with love. And that is light. And that light is what he will emerge into. And you're seeing it already starting to happen. And the complexity of that is that one of those people might be Vladimir Sokov, the Red Lantern, which is bizarre and complex. Their whole relationship doesn't make sense. But Vlad still, even when they're fighting, approaches Alan with a level of love and respect that is part of his journey and leading him out of the darkness. So that's a key theme, and that's something that issue 6, I think, hopefully will bring home, is that Alan comes to understand that he's not alone and doesn't have to live alone, and that love is everywhere.
Well said.
That I really like the way you phrased that: a secret identity within a secret identity.
Yeah. Yeah, well,
That's really
I always say his secret identity has a secret identity, which, is an
Inception.
inception
Yeah,
kind of
exactly.
thing, and by the way, there's probably a third level of that for all I know. Like, that's how complex it is for him, early on. It won't be by the end. Like there's still complexity. There are
Mhm.
still a lot of questions, but because ultimately we know his story. He doesn't come out of the closet until he's an old man to his
Yeah.
adult children,
Yeah.
you know? And so there are reasons for that. And they are reasons that are true to life, and they ought to be understood and respected, just, you know,
Mhm.
because it's his journey.
Yeah.
That's just amazing. I do want to say though, speaking of secrets, I messaged you one time and I was like, "Oh, I really like this part of issue 5, and I can't wait for this thing." And you said, "No, here's a secret. Don't get too attached to this thing."
I know. I did tell
Like,
you that. I was like,
Yeah.
yeah, because I got worried because you were like, oh, this is so great. I'm like, don't get too attached, because
it was funny though.
remember, we're going into issue 6, you know,
Yeah.
it's the last issue. Lots of stuff is going to have to
Something is
happen,
gonna happen. Yeah.
you
We'll
know.
have to
So
elaborate on that in a future episode. So
it
Yes. Yeah.
doesn't mean that even I know the outcome of all that stuff, but it if nothing else, don't get attached, because there's only basically because there's only one issue left anyway. And I've got a lot of denouement to deal with Alan. We've got a lot of, like, the resolution to a lot of stuff that we've been dealing with has to happen in issue 6. So it means that, you know, we don't necessarily get a lot of time to do some of the stuff that you might think, oh,
Only
this is
22
so cool.
pages.
This is the 20
Unfortunately.
pages, 6
Yeah.
issues, 20. It's a 120-page story.
Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately, the way it's structured, some stuff only comes towards the end, and these forces of nature uh, show up, and those things have to be dealt with. But I wish if we had more time, if we had more space, if we had an ongoing, you know, or more issues or something.
That'd be nice. We've
But you
we've
know,
also
never
we've
say
also
never.
championed for more of you writing
Yep.
Alan. That's for sure in our
Yep.
reviews. So
Thank you. I don't know. I mean, it's funny. Like, I don't know that they would even ask me to. You know, it's sort of like this was it. This is all they asked me to do.
well, hey,
And
good news is it's selling. So there's
yeah, it's
that's the
true. But
avenue. That's an avenue
I
towards
don't
maybe more.
I don't put it past any, you know, buddy in, like, you know, marketing or business to say to completely, you know, not really pay attention to that and think, yeah, but imagine if so and so did it. Like, we could sell even more, you know.
Yeah.
So, like, that's, and those, by the way, those are absolutely valid things for them to come up with and to think. And, you know, I don't have the a monopoly on telling the
Oh, for
stories of
sure.
Alan
Yeah,
Scott. You
for
know,
sure.
I hope a lot of people come in and add their voices to his story.
Definitely.
One of the things, though, one of the greatest things about this whole process has been getting to know the Nodell family.
no, Dell's, yeah.
Yeah.
You know, getting to know Spencer and his grandson throughout this process. They are the kindest people. They've been so generous and with everything. And I just, you know, I wish I never got to meet Marty. And I wish I had, and his wife, you know, I wish I had, um, but I feel like, in some weird way, getting to know the family and getting on with them the way I have, I feel closer to Alan in this way. I feel a connection to his story and his origins. And that's a thing that I didn't expect to get out of this. So, you know, I come in all the time, and I'm working on characters that have been around I don't I don't walk away when I do the Long Halloween feeling like I now have some special connection to Batman that I didn't have before. I feel, you know, like I understand what I've done, and I understand my Batman and what I've
Yeah.
written, but there's just something special about getting to know
Meeting the family.
and being
Yeah.
welcomed by the family of the guy that created the character.
I watched a podcast that you were on with Spencer.
That's
Yeah.
really cool. Yeah.
That was
really
it was really cool to
Well, you
hear
know,
them back and forth.
he wanted to do that. You saw him, he was frustrated because he saw people saying online that, you know, that Marty Nodell would be livid with what DC has done with the character, meaning having him come out of the closet. That was what they were talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah. of
And
course,
he was
that's
just
true.
like, I want to go out there and tell people about my dad and my mom because they don't know them. And so he told some great stories about how he said that's not who they were, welcoming, loving, progressive people who, and he told a story about, I think it was in Kansas City. They used to visit Kansas City. I think it was Kansas City. And every time they went there, they would stay with a gay couple that were like their best friends.
Mhm.
And you know, he said, you don't know them. So stop talking like you know what they would say, because I think my parents would love this. I think if nothing else, they would love that people are talking about Alan.
Yeah.
And he's out there and he's still part of the
Yeah.
world and part of the conversation. And then,
Yeah. What
you
you're
know,
doing is huge for this character.
Yeah.
well, and what DC has done. Look, I didn't, you know, he came out of the closet before I got
Yeah.
here.
Right.
And,
Right.
you know, certainly that happened in Earth 2, and then it happened in Infinite Crisis in the Prime Earth, or I'm sorry, Infinite Frontier. I always say Infinite Crisis, Infinite Frontier in the Prime universe. And then a few years went by before we did the Alan Scott book. And, you know, he hadn't had a book in 75 years or so.
Right.
And
Right.
and so I'm just like the guy who came along at the right time, I guess.
Right.
But DC had already made those decisions. And I do feel like I wish, as a gay man too, like as a comic book fan, I wish that when they had him come out of the closet, that there was a story that came out. Like,
Yeah.
you know, within a few months, we would have gotten this
Yeah.
mini series or anything. But they let it go for a while in a way that I think it frustrated a lot of fans. And I think rightfully so. A lot of fans I hear from say, yeah, it really bothered me because that's a big thing to say about this character, for this character to be going through. But we only got a couple of pages in Infinite Frontier. And like, I want to know, why is this important to the character?
Yeah.
What does this say about his life and who he is? How does it define his life as a hero? Tell me more, you know?
Yeah.
And so it took a while, but eventually we were able to get there.
We
You know,
got it, and that's the most
thanks to
important
Jeff
thing. Yeah.
Johns. I mean,
Yeah.
Jeff was like, you know, we've got to do an Alan Scott book. Let's do it.
Yeah.
That's
That's awesome.
By the way, I know
Speaking-
you got some harassment on Twitter, and I want to say that I'm sorry for that. You know,
Oh, well, I always get harassment on everybody who works in comics or anything
it's
related.
Twitter. It's
That's why
unfortunately,
listen, I was planning on leaving Twitter because it had already devolved into just a
Yeah.
cesspool, and then I didn't do it. And then the Alan Scott book started coming out, and it was all that nonsense. But I had more followers there than anywhere else, and I was like, I still have a voice here. I can keep promoting the book.
yeah.
And then like New Year's came around, and somebody asked me, "What's your New Year's resolution?" And I didn't have one, and I thought, you know what? I am leaving Twitter. That's my New Year's resolution. And I've never been happier than having let that go. I just let it go. And I feel so much better. I highly recommend that to anyone who certainly works around comics or is a fan of comics
yeah.
or anything, animation, TV, anything like that. You know, it's and the other social media places will eventually, I'm sure, devolve into something, but
Oh, for sure.
for now, it really does change your entire outlook, your all my mental health journey on January 1st just like took a huge spike upward. I was like, it's so
Well,
nice not to be.
we're still there waving the banner for this book. So
Well, I
Yeah, we're
appreciate
still there
that.
trying-
Thank
we're,
you.
we're being as loud as possible. I always tell you, that's why I told you when I asked you on this podcast, I'm like, look, we're not the biggest podcast, but there's nobody louder on the internet about Green Lantern than me.
People must be listening because I've really been surprised by how well this book has been accepted, by how much it's sold. There are, you know, certainly in Los Angeles where I live, you can't find copies of any issue. You know, it's certainly of issue 1 and 2. Eventually, the way series go, stores will start just pulling stuff for the pull list or their order
Yeah.
based on the pull list.
Yeah.
But the first few issues, they're still feeling it out, and you couldn't find them You couldn't find them
Yeah.
on shelves,
It's
you
crazy.
know,
It was crazy.
and that really was amazing, you know, and I'm grateful. And it's because of guys like you that are out there, you know.
That's why I'm like, I'm glad I went digital, because if not, I wouldn't have been able to find it. So like,
True.
I'm glad it was one of my choices, because at least I have it now and it's here.
I went to a comic book shop the other day, and I they had they had over ordered
Oh,
issues 1 and 2 of Alan Scott, and so they still had like 16 copies left of, and this is last week,
yeah.
Wow.
where when those issues came out, they were flying off the shelf in this area, and you couldn't find them anywhere. And I didn't even know that these guys had extra copies, and because I would have been directing people to them,
Yeah.
and but they were there, and I was like, I, you know, and I do a lot of conventions now, and people are always asking me for issue 1 and 2, and I don't have anymore. They sold out like immediately.
Yeah.
So
Did they
I'm
have
not,
the foil variant of number
they
one?
didn't. They only had the A covers.
How did I know you were going to ask about the variant?
So I, so I,
I have that, by the way. So.
yeah, that's great. It's great. The virgin foil variant, as they
Yeah.
call it. Like, how scandalous. They so I pulled all 16 of these books off the shelf, and I'm like, I'm getting these. And I brought them up to the
Oh,
front,
you
and I
can
was
take it
like,
to
I
conventions.
want to clean you out. You know, let me get all the stock, because you know, I want to
You can take it to conventions. Yeah.
give them away to people, what have you.
Yeah.
And they said, great, you know what, I'm going to text the owner and see if we have more, maybe in the back somewhere or something. So they did. And the owner said, yeah, I think we might, but I have to go looking for them. And they said, but also, he can't have all 16. I'll go 5 of one and 3 of the other. He can have half of them. And I was like, what do you mean? This isn't a negotiation. They were out for sale. I want to
I'm
buy
buying
them.
them. Yeah,
I'm not
exactly.
asking, I'm not getting a discount. I want to give me I'm here as a customer. Let me
Let
buy
me
them.
give you your money, my money. Or
But he wanted them still out. He wanted some out on his shelf, because uh I guess it's been something that has brought people into the store, and
which is
when they come into
awesome.
the store, they get that, and they pick up other things when they're there, which is what we want to see. That's what retailers want to see. It's what I want to see. So
Yeah.
I absolutely understood and support him on
Awesome.
that. I thought I was doing him a favor. I'm like, let me clean you out of all your stock. But I'm happy to know that he thinks that it's still bringing people into the store. That's amazing.
That's great. Yeah. Speaking of comic books and superheroes, tell us a little bit about your first experience and exposure to them.
Comics and superheroes?
Yeah.
Oh, well,
Yes.
okay. So when I was a very young man, I had a bunch of Spider-Man toys. So Spider-Man toys might have been the very first thing that anything superhero related, maybe. That led to the first entertainment that besides toys, that I had as a kid, which was I was obsessed with Spider-Man and his Amazing
Amazing
Friends,
Friends.
which I still, to this day, and I referred to it in a script once this way that I wrote. It's Spider-Man and his Amazing Furniture, because that was the thing that I could not get over, was when he would, you know, flip the switch and all the couch would turn over, become a computer. You know,
Yeah.
that was
awesome.
amazing to me. So yeah, so that was, you know, with Iceman and Firestar, and you know, that was my show when I was a kid. I was obsessed with it. Still love it.
Yeah.
So so then comics, like the first time I ever even looked at anything that was comic book related was my brother's best friend gave me a hand-me-down edition of Son of Origins of Marvel Comics.
Okay.
And so I devoured that, and I kept going back and rereading Iron Man's origin story over and over and over again. I was obsessed. I was like, this Iron Man guy is really something. So I was really into that. But those were all like just like black and white reprints, you know.
Right.
So there was no color or anything. So it was a weird way to experience comics first. And uh also he gave me with that, he gave me a Thor, and I don't remember what number it is. I should look it up. But that had Beta Ray Bill. It was a very
Oh,
famous Beta Ray
yeah.
Bill cover
yeah,
that I
yeah,
think
yeah.
Walt Simonson did. And what is so, ridiculous is that fast forward many years later, and I got to co-write a DC Showcase short film with Walt and Weezy Simonson. And thinking back to
Awesome.
like the very first comic book I ever had in my hand. And Walt then, a couple of years later, did a variant cover of my Masters of the Universe Revelation comic
That's
book.
awesome.
So yeah, it's just like unreal.
That's coming
That's
first,
Yeah.
full circle.
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
life that I've gotten to live is I can't believe it.
Yeah.
First comics that I bought off the spinner rack were Star Trek from DC, and
Mhm.
then Transformers from Marvel, and it might have even been Transformers, then Star Trek, now that I think about it. And then Batmania started.
Oh yeah.
Mhm.
And I was watching the 66 show, and I really
Mhm.
liked it.
Yeah.
Then started hearing about the movie coming out. And I was like, something about this is very interesting to me. So I was like, well, I wanted to devour, Batman stuff. And I started picking up Batman comics. And so those were my entry point into really becoming obsessed with DC comics and the DC universe. I was reading Batman when Denny O'Neil was editing, and it was like
Ah.
Marv
Mm.
Wolfman's
Yeah.
stories like Year 3 and Lonely Place of Dying.
Mm.
But even before, I mean, I read stuff before that, but those were the ones that, and like Dark Knight Returns came out.
Of course. Yeah.
That was a whole thing too.
Yeah.
But something about those Marv stories, maybe it was because Tim Drake became the new Robin, and
So I
my
guess
name,
Tim is your
my name was
favorite.
Tim.
Yeah. So
you know,
Tim is your favorite Robin? Is that it?
yeah, Tim is my Robin, certainly. Although, Dick Grayson has a real
Yeah.
important place in my life, and Jason Todd too. I
I
wanted
like them
so
all.
much to call the number when we got to call the 900 number to decide whether Jason Todd would live or die. And
I remember that. Yeah.
But would you have saved him, or would you have called the other
I was
way?
going to vote for him to die.
Oh, poor guy.
Yeah.
Can't catch a break.
Even back then, if you've read any of my comics, I was always the kid who was going to vote for Jason to die.
Can I do that with Nort? Can I do that with Nort somewhere? Who do I
Man,
call?
poor Nort.
Only because even as a kid, I wanted the drama. Like to me, it's like if he lives, that's not as exciting. I want the drama and the consequences. What's going to happen? And so, ultimately, that's what we got. And by the way, like what an era of storytelling. I mean, really incredible and that was what I learned about storytelling when I was a kid, because I was obsessed with my favorite movie still to this day is the animated 1986 Transformers, the movie.
Yeah.
And that was
such
all,
great taste.
yeah, it was all, thank you. It was all about consequences and how the good guys don't always win.
Traumatized
Bad
kids
guys
everywhere.
might win. The good guys can die. Like those were big concepts that opened up for me. And then that was what was happening with Jason Todd and with Batman and him dealing with the consequences of that. And then, by the way, then Marv Wolfman came in and was working on Transformers after the movie, working on the animated show. And I'm like, I feel like Marv like sculpted my storytelling brain as a kid. And then again, fast forward years later, I'm doing Titans for DC, and I get hooked up with Marv to do a story. We worked on a book together that ultimately never got made. And I was like, not only did I get to meet Marv, but I'm doing Zooms like this with him. And we're talking story and we're crafting a story together. I was like, this is insane.
That's fantastic.
My husband is the world's biggest Nova fan.
Oh.
So I got to introduce him to Marv, which was incredible.
That's awesome.
So here I am, meeting the guy who created Tim Drake, and he's meeting the guy who created Nova, and it was something. Cool. I love that guy.
He's so awesome.
Treasure, Marv Wolfman, and just a workhorse, just a workhorse.
Well, that puts me on to my next question. By the way, though, I've got to say, though, I saw on social media somewhere at one time, though, you used the phrase hubba hubba to refer to your husband, which I thought was very cool. I don't think I've ever seen anybody write hubba hubba before on social media.
That's how I feel.
Well, good for you.
He's amazing. He's a huge comic book fan. He's a much more Marvel than DC, and
Okay.
I've always been much more DC than Marvel. So you'd think that that would be maybe a, would be challenging in our
I think it's
marriage, but
it's a
it's
nice
not.
diverse. It's a nice diverse thing.
No, you know what it is, especially as there's a thing among same-sex married couples or same-sex relationships where we're like, oh, you doubled your wardrobe. That's how we always that's how we feel. And then so there's that, but this is the comic book version of that. I feel like I doubled my wardrobe, my comics wardrobe, because I got hired. I worked at Marvel Studios on an animated show for a year. And there were times when characters would come up that I didn't have much knowledge about. I
Yeah.
would just put it on mute and I'd call over to Brian and I'd say, who is so and so? What's his
Who's
deal?
this? Yeah.
Tell me.
That's awesome.
You have your very own Marvel encyclopedia right there.
Totally. So it's
Yeah.
like doubling your wardrobe. Like I say.
So
it
it's
works
like the
out.
amalgam comics. There you go.
That's right. Well, there it is. That's the
That's right. That's right. We're an amalgam marriage.
the wedding was the amalgam. The amalgam universe.
Yeah.
So
it's nice.
speaking of writing, when did you know in your life the moment that you knew, hey, I'm going to be a professional writer? I'm going to make this my life's work.
Well, it's funny because I'll tell you when, but then what happened after that was over the years, I have realized how I was a writer but I was the only one who didn't know it for a long time.
Yeah.
So, but officially, it's another wild story about I can't believe this is my life.
Mm-hmm.
I have been going to San Diego Comic-Con every year since 2000 when I first moved out west to LA. And but I used to go as a fan, and then I was going because I was working for a company that presented products there, and I was working for them, like working in their booth and stuff. I did that for a few years. Now I go as a comic book and animation and TV creator. And so I have these sort of eras of San Diego Comic-Con for myself. But during the fan era, when I was still trying to figure out my journey, I went to drama school and couldn't really figure out what I was doing with that degree and where I was going to end up.
Right.
I went to the screening of the animated Flashpoint Paradox movie.
Wow.
Yes.
Which
Love
would have
that
been
movie.
around, I guess, when would that have been? 2012 or?
I think so.
2012. I'll look that up. But
2012.
yeah,
It was right after the book had come out, I think, because they were working on the movie while
All
the
I know
book-
is I love that. I love that movie. And
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so here's the thing. So I'm sitting there with my best friend, and I'm watching this movie, and we got up and we left, and I had this just lightning strike moment of clarity. And all I said was, that's what I want to do.
It's awesome.
That's what I want to do. And I knew it. And then it took
2013.
2013. That's pretty fast because
that's like 11 years ago.
Yep.
So it was only a couple of years later.
Yeah.
Only a couple of years later that about 3 years later, I was hired by the people who produced, directed, wrote, and made Flashpoint Paradox. The very individuals, James Tucker and Jim Krieg, hired me to script Reign of the Supermen, animated movie in the same universe as Flashpoint Paradox.
Yeah.
And I was not, in 2013, I did not have a career as a professional writer, and I wasn't really even sure that I was going to be able to make that happen. So I was kind of in the wilderness, and it all kind of came together a couple of years later for me, which is unreal when you think about how I was saying earlier about how I'm not devout. I don't feel like, religion and, cosmic sort of things don't necessarily compute for me. And then I tell you these stories about stuff that makes no sense sequentially in my life, that I've gotten to do the things I've gotten to do that defined and made who I was from when I was a kid, that I've gotten to work with those people and been welcomed into their lives and been a part of that story that I was reading at the beginning of, I
Yeah.
was watching and reading the beginning of my life. And now I get to, my voice is part of that story now. And that is cosmic. And I don't understand it, but
By the way, I'm so glad that they did that. They redid the Death and Return of Superman story, because the first one was just something. Okay, it's a nice summation, but like 3/4 of the good stuff is
I'll tell
missing. I'm
you,
like, well,
but what we did with Reign of the Supermen was very different than the Reign comics in a lot of ways. Like
right.
what Jim Krieg, said to me when we started working on it, he said something I've never forgotten. It's always stuck with me. He said, "Look, we're not here to make a replica of the thing that you read when you were
Right.
younger. Our job is to help you feel the way you felt when you read or saw that original thing. It's not about one for one panel for shots. It's about what were the feelings that people felt and how can we put those on their feet and make that into a movie and a moving picture and tell a story.
That's a
And
really good approach.
that's how I've approached everything. That's certainly how I approached Long Halloween. There's a lot of sort of, I mean, you could have just taken the dialogue from that book and put it on screen mostly and made it work and it would have been great. Um, but it would have left some things out about stuff that you
Yeah.
felt when you read it, and some of the stuff that's subtextual that works in subtext in a book but doesn't necessarily work on screen. And then on top of that, there's a lot of, in movies, it's hard to get away with omniscient narrator or inner monologue.
Yeah.
You can do it in detective noir, which would have been, and I tried when I started adapting Long Halloween. I tried to make that work, but it just didn't ring true. It didn't really work in
Right.
terms of you wanted on screen for there to be certain things happening, and you
Mm.
want the story to come out in character and dialogue, character that is revealed through dialogue between other characters. And so it's dramatic. That's what drama is. It's a conversation between
Yeah.
people. That's how we tell a story. And so we just had to kind of go back to the drawing board on it. But I feel like what we were able to capture was the spirit and the heart of that story. And in the
Absolutely.
end, again, we're not here to replace the thing. In fact, if anything, we're here to celebrate the source material so that they can live side by side, and then people will go out and buy the book and read the book and will also buy the movie and watch the
Yeah.
movie and enjoy
Yeah.
all of it. That's the one good thing about a multiverse. I always talk about how a multiverse feels like a lazy version of storytelling, but honestly, like it allows for completely different
Yeah.
versions of stories that you think you know and love, and for us to tell different variations on those stories that reveal things about them that maybe never considered. And that is where I feel like, oh, well, we can all live in the same multiverse. Like Jeff Loeb's and Tim Sale's book gets to live in Butch
Yeah.
Lukic and Tim Sheridan's Long Halloween movie.
Yeah.
Like they get to live side by side, or in different parts of the multiverse, and be welcomed for what they are.
And the beauty of that for someone like me who's a fan of both is on Batman Day, I can read the book and watch the movie in one day, and it's a great day.
Yeah.
And it's fantastic. So I'm
True.
like,
With
I
both
win.
Death of Superman and Reign of Superman, those were day one buys for me. I was
Oh,
waiting
yeah.
outside of Target as soon as it opened. I was like, gotta have this.
That's great. Yeah,
Awesome.
Rain was a tough one because it was a universe that James Tucker, the producer, had created, a version that started with kind of a New 52 thing with Flashpoint
Yeah.
Paradox, and we saw a lot of New 52 stuff in the storyline. But there were certain characters, like for instance, we had to change. We couldn't have Mongol be
Yeah, that's right.
this big villain because they had never had Mongol in those movies. So
Yeah.
there was a whole segment of people who were watching those movies who really don't read the comics and didn't know wouldn't know who Mongol is. We'd have to spend time explaining and introducing him in a movie that was introducing so many new characters. There were there's a handful of Supermen we had to introduce you to,
Yeah,
let
yeah.
alone if we had to bring on a whole new villain.
Yeah.
So we had to change it to Darkseid because
Yeah.
everyone would be familiar with Darkseid.
Right. Yeah. And it still worked. It still worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But things like that like offended my sensibilities as, like the first ever Superman comics I ever bought were Reign of the Supermen. First ever when I was a kid. Or
my first one was 1991's The Man of Steel #1. I think it was 91.
Yeah.
And I still have it, and I still
God.
it's and it's
But
funny
it was funny because go ahead.
a lot of people are like, you're a Batman fan first. I'm like, well, I may like him slightly more just because I grew up with the movie and the TV show and all that. But my first comic was actually Superman. So say what you will.
I did not go for Death of Superman when the comics were, and it was the biggest thing. It's all I did. It was all over the news. It was on not just nerd circles. It was on the nightly news.
It was everywhere.
And I was not interested at the time because, first of all, I was like, well, you've already told me how it ends.
Yes.
Number
Thanks
one.
for the spoiler. Yeah.
Spoiler alert. Number two, it felt to me like, well, I mean, I make a joke about I already know how it ends, but the truth is it was designed to be an ending. And I thought, well, why come on just for the ending? It didn't compute for me at the time.
Yeah.
I was reading Batman and what have you. And then Reign of the Supermen happened. And it was like these mysterious new designs, these weird Superman characters that are imaginative and interesting. And one of them might be the real Superman. And what is going on? Like, which is funny because, and so I ran out to buy those. What's funny about that is the definition of what I was telling you earlier, which was all about consequences.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, we did Death of Superman, and now there are consequences we're dealing with. And I was like, consequences? I'm all in.
Man. Yeah.
Talk about it, so that's totally my story sensibility. Is that's the stuff that appeals to me.
And it went on for a long time. It wasn't like 6 weeks and it's over.
Yeah, they kept
a bunch of comics, and it was like it felt like it lasted for a long time. Although when I was doing research for the movie, I was like, wow, this was much shorter, like a much shorter period than I thought.
Wasn't it a year that they kept him gone?
Like, I thought it was a whole year, but when I was researching it, I don't think you can classify it as a whole year. Stories.
Well, nowadays nowadays they don't keep people dead.
It could have filled out a whole year.
Yeah.
At least it could have filled out 5 years as far as I'm concerned.
Now it's like 3 months later. Hey, guess what?
You know what? One of the great things
was coming back.
One of the great things was that I got to, when I was doing that movie, the guy who from DC Comics who would read all of any script that we did for animation, everything we would get when we get notes from DC Comics, who like works as the licensor of the characters in that situation, because Warner Animation made the movies for Warner Home Entertainment, but DC was essentially licensing it out to them, even though they're part of the same parent company and what have you. So part of that deal is that DC has a certain ownership over how the characters are represented and the stories. And so the person who was the contact when I was doing these movies, who's in charge of that, was Mike Carlin. He was the animation guy at DC. And so I'm doing this Reign of the Superman story, which for anybody who doesn't know, Mike Carlin was the editor of Superman comics. And, the Death of Superman and Reign of the Superman and all this stuff was all on his watch. This was his story, essentially. And so I got to do this under, with him every step of the way. So even though I always felt like, oh, we're changing stuff, and I wanted to be more like the comics, but the production necessitated those changes. Mike was there all the time giving notes, and he, never was like, I don't remember. He might have said that. He might have once or twice given a note that was like, it's a little too far from, but I don't remember that. I think he was always just very encouraging, and like, he knew that we were still trying to go for the spirit of the story.
Yeah, it's the essence of
the details were different.
It's the essence of the thing that is mostly important. As opposed to having, I remember this scene from this panel. If you have that scene and the character is totally different than what he's supposed to be, like 180, it doesn't matter. You can have all
I will always be grateful for the way that Mike. I was a baby writer coming
Yeah.
in. The way that Mike Carlin, his kindness and his guidance through that process was amazing. And then when I did Long Halloween, you know, I was terrified, terrified. And I turned in an outline for part one, and I was like, oh man, it's gonna be bad. Like there's gonna be so much that I'm gonna have to go back and change. I'm gonna have to go back to the drawing board. This is gonna be tough. And we waited and we got the notes back from Mike Carlin at DC. And the notes were, this is perfect, no notes.
Oh, that's a
Wow.
great
That was
note to
it.
get.
Wow.
And whereas now, hang on now, as the writer, I'm like, wait a minute, what do you mean no notes? Of course there are notes. Like, give me the notes. Like, I want the notes. I want to make sure we get it right.
Yeah.
But my crisis of conscience in that moment, like I was having a panic attack really over like, am I going to get this right? This is a beloved story. I don't want to screw this up. Maybe I don't know what I'm doing, is what I'm thinking in that
Right.
moment. And here comes Mike Carlin to say, you got this.
That's awesome.
And
Wow.
the confidence that that boost that gave me got me through the rest of that whole process. And again, I'll never be able to repay him for that. It was incredible.
You mentioned notes and changes, so here it leads into my next question.
Mm.
Donnie and I are big fans of Motu and specifically Revelation and Revolution. And you mentioned that you changed some dialogue in the script based on a conversation with Lena Headey one time. So what's the difference between writing for something like Motu, and then writing for something like a comic book, like be it Green Lantern or whatever?
Oh, I mean, easy answer on that. Although I do want to correct you. There's you might be conflating two stories, which are
Okay.
that when the first thing was I found out I was scripting episode 4 of Revelation called Land of the Dead.
Mhm.
At the time, I titled it Fall of a Sparrow, but I think it gave away too much about what was going to happen in the episode, so they wanted to change it to Land of the Dead. And but I was scripting it. I was in the middle of it, and I had this crazy notion that I wanted to put like I'm a toy guy, so I look at it as what I bring the toys together, and I want to take my Evil Lyn and Orko toys, and I want to see what happens. Like
Yeah.
when I put those toys together, what happens? So we did that, and the conversation that came out was really good, and I was like, oh, this is interesting stuff. Like I want to learn more about this. And then I heard while I was in the middle of that, I heard that we had gotten Lena Headey to
Yeah.
play Evil Lyn. Now, I've been a fan of Lena's
Perfect casting, by the way. Yeah.
since Sarah Connor Chronicles.
Yes, me
Great
too.
show. Great show.
Yes, yes.
And then Game of Thrones happens,
Yes.
and I'm just like, the minute that they said that Lena was going to be Evil Lyn, I knew her voice. So having never met her, but being a fan of her work, I just knew her voice, and I knew what she was capable of. And I said, ooh, everything sounds different to me. I got to go back. I ran to my
Okay.
computer and I just started rewriting all of Evil Lyn's dialogue and made it chewier and more the stuff that I knew that Lena would be able to just get right out the gate. And happily, I was right. She crushes it.
It's
You can't
fantastic.
imagine anybody else playing that. You can't imagine anybody else ever playing that character.
I want her to do it in live action too. That's just me.
Absolutely. She'd be amazing in live action for that. She'd be amazing. So then that was on Revelation on season 1. Then when it came time for Revolution season 2, so I would sit in on the voice records, which we did over Zoom for a lot of the actors.
That's got to be awesome.
Well, yeah, but I mean, I'm there to kind of be helpful if somebody has a question, or we need a rewrite, if the line as we hear it now doesn't make sense or whatever. I'm just there to be helpful. But you get to hang out and be there and watch these really cool people doing this stuff and be a part of it. And we got to this very important scene early on in episode 2, which I'd written, which is called Ascension, and it was between Evil Lyn and Granomir, the ancient dragon Granomir, who's dying, voiced by John Delancey, ultimately in
Star Trek
show.
Yeah,
Q from Star Trek. He's terrific. And so the voice director says, as we're getting ready to do this, the voice director would normally read in the other actor's part. So she would have read in Granimir's lines
Sure.
for Lena, and Lena would act off of that and do her lines. And the voice director said, "Hey, Tim, would you mind reading in Granimir?" I'm like, "You want me to read this scene with Lena Headey as Eva
This
Lynn?"
is what I'm remembering. Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Forgot about that.
And it's like, yeah, go ahead. Okay. So I got to do the scene with her. The scene that's in the show is she's acting opposite me, but you don't hear me. It's John Delancey, who then was
Right.
acting opposite someone else, the voice
Right.
director.
Yeah.
Later on, that's how we do it. We have to record people separately.
That's
See,
awesome.
now I want to go back and watch this episode again, just to like imagine you there.
Yeah.
Imagine me there, because I'm just like trying not to be like like making his face and be so excited at every word that she's saying. It was incredible. Now, your question was about the difference between
Ready for more? Yeah, that and yeah.
O2. And it's a great question because it is exactly what I just explained to you, which is I came from TV and I went to drama school. I worked in television and movies, and I came to comics later. And for me, I find I still feel that something is missing when I'm working in comics. And I could never put my finger on it until just like a month ago. It occurred to me out of nowhere a month ago. I miss actors so much.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Actors are incredible. The good actors, the kind of caliber of actors you get to work with on Masters of the Universe.
Yeah. Oh,
Wow. Yeah.
Just look at that cast list.
It's insane.
There's not a weak link.
It's
And
insane.
well, there's
Yeah.
one. There's one weak link in Revolution, and it's this guy that you're looking at. You're talking to right here. I voiced King Miro, He-Man's grandfather, for one scene in a flashback in episode 2, which I was honored to get to do.
Oh, yeah.
But I would still call myself the weakest link of the whole series. But actors are magical beings, and they will take something that you've written, and in their interpretation of it, they will elevate it 9 times out of 10. They just by speaking it, even if they don't, just by speaking it truthfully and lending it a real human voice, they bring it to new heights that then people are like, wow, what great writing. You're a great writer. And I'm like, yes, I am, right? Meanwhile, I'm thinking, the actor did it all.
Take the credit and run.
Lena did it all. Mark Hamill did it all, like,
Yeah.
but they don't know that, so that's the thing about comics that I really miss. I hear the actors in my brain all the time, or at least the characters, their voices
Right.
in my head all the time. Which is a problem, and I need to seek help for that. But no, but I do, and I don't know that everybody reads comics the same way that I do. But we all, when we watch a movie or a TV show, we're hearing the actors.
Well, you know what I do? Just as an example of what you just said. If I'm reading Batman, I'm imagining Kevin Conroy's voice.
Oh, well,
that's just what I hear. Like, it's like,
okay. So
not that I can do it justice, but it's like I can.
Everybody who's listening to this is going to hate me if they didn't at the beginning of this, because once again, I'm going to tell you, my very first job professionally as a writer in television was on a show called Justice League Action.
Oh,
and in that show, we got to do, and I got to, as my second episode that I wrote for that series, we got to have Mark Hamill as the Joker and Kevin Conroy as Batman. And I got to go to the recording studio and meet them and hang out with them.
That's insane.
And got to be there for them doing their thing. That's my first job in television.
I would have retired right after that.
About a charmed existence that, so I feel like everyone's going to hate me now because I'm like, oh, and then I saw Flashpoint, Paradox, and then I got to write Man of the Superman. And then
you're better than me because I would have retired after day one. I would be like, all right, it's not going to get better than this. I'm done.
It's never, you'd think that. And then I get to work with Mark Hamill again on Masters of the Universe.
Which is insane.
And by the way, Kevin Conroy too. He was Merman in Revelation.
Yep.
And so it's unbelievable.
That's awesome.
The world gets smaller, but I say this stuff. Honest to God, I'm telling you, I'm not bragging. I'm just telling you this
No,
stuff
it's awesome.
to tell you
I'm living
I am
vicariously through
just,
these interviews.
I know I am just a nerd who loves and has always loved this stuff. And somehow I have managed to trick my way into getting to be around this stuff and be around these people. And I am incredibly grateful for
That's awesome.
the life that I get to live. I'm so grateful for
That's
it.
wonderful.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Donnie, unfortunately, it's time for the last question. So
Yeah.
hit him with the last one.
Well, we always like to kind of end our shows like this when we have a creator on. Who is Tim Sheridan? Away from being the creator, apart from that, how do you like to relax and rejuvenate yourself?
Oh, well, first I was going to say the answer is clearly I'm a braggadocious jerk. But no, I'm so glad you asked that because so much of the time our lives as creators and writers and what have you becomes our work and everything is the work and it consumes us.
Mhm.
And sometimes the things that we do to relax are still connected to the work in some ways.
Mhm.
And so I will say there is something I've been doing a lot lately since January. I've been going to cons all around the world now, and I'm getting to meet fans and other creators and I am not kidding when I tell you it is like a recharge of my batteries when I go to these things. Now you'd think going to the airport, getting on a plane, checking into a hotel, going over to a convention and standing around all day. There's that sounds like there's
Where's
you
the
can get
fun? Yeah.
exhausted. It
Yeah.
sounds like, oh, that's exhausting stuff to have to go do all that. And but yet no. It
That's
is
awesome.
I come back home excited, rejuvenated, ready to get back to work. And so while it's connected to my job, I still feel like that's for me. I'm just getting to go and enjoy meeting nice people. Comic cons are such an antidote to social media. Social
They're
media,
bizarro Twitter.
it's
Yes.
real social instead of fake
Yeah.
social. And it's
Yeah.
like at cons, people want to talk about what they like, not what they don't like.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And that's
exactly.
everything.
Yeah.
That's the whole game. That's how this whole thing started. That's how we all found each other. When I
Yeah.
was a kid, before we even had the internet, we would meet at comic book stores, or
Yes.
we would find each other at Star Trek conventions, because we were looking for connection to talk about and celebrate the stuff we love. And social media has devolved into talking about this, how much we hate things and what we hate. And I just don't have time for that. So that's one thing. I will say, though, aside from that, like when I'm home, the things I do to unplug, I am crazy about cooking, learning more about cooking. I watch way too much cooking on YouTube. My husband can't stand the YouTube algorithm that I have managed under both of our account,
Yeah.
but
So
it has his
he
name
gets
on
all
it,
the
and it's like all cooking videos all the time. And but I love it. It relaxes me. I love thinking about what different things I can make and different ways I can, like, techniques I can introduce to make things differently. And sometimes I'll get
That's cool.
fixated on something. During lockdown, I became one of those people who got obsessed with baking sourdough bread because and
Yeah.
it was out of
We did that
necessity.
here too. Yeah.
It was out of necessity because there was no bread to be found and there was no
Yeah.
yeast where we are.
That's crazy.
So I had to figure it out, and I wanted bread because I'm hungry. And so I have bread all the time. So I learned, I taught myself, I watched videos, I figured it out. I love doing that. I
awesome.
became, obsessed with we don't have any good pizza available where we are. It's like a pizza desert where I live. I don't know why. You have to drive a little while to get good pizza. And I'm like, but I want it now. So I had to figure, so I have spent a lot of time cultivating making really good pizza at
That's
home.
awesome.
And so that gets to be a treat for us. And it's something that I enjoy doing. So these are the things that get me excited that are outside of the world that I'm unplugged and I get to enjoy. And spending time with my cats.
What's funny is you say pizza. I'm in Canada, but my background's Italian. So anybody that says pizza, I'm like, oh, now you're speaking my language. It's like pizza.
I mean, listen,
I'm there.
pizza or anything Italian for me,
No,
my mom while not Italian, we're not Italian. I'm Irish. I
Right.
did the 23andMe and it told me I was like 97, no, I was like 99.3% Irish and 0.7% Western European, which I was
Okay.
like, that's Ireland.
Yeah. So it's like, and
So,
tell me something I don't know.
so anyway, but my mom learned how to cook from her best friend's mom, who was Italian. And so that was kind of like Italian for me that's home cooking for me.
What's funny is a friend of mine came to visit from Utah one year, and we're just talking, and he's telling me, "Oh, I've been to Italian restaurants." I'm like, "Yeah, where?" And he says Olive Garden, and I'm like, "Get on the plane and go back home." I'm like, that is insulting.
Go home.
So we gave him one of my mom's recipes for tomato sauce. He
Yeah,
went back home and tried it. He goes, "I've never eaten anything like it in my life." I said,
that's right.
this is why holidays are crazy in my house, because all you do is eat. But
That's the thing about
yeah,
Italian food for me. It's like sometimes it's made slowly and with great love, and it's made for a big family who is
now,
going to enjoy it together. And
now you need to go to cons in Italy. You have an excuse, right? You go
oh, please send me. Yes.
there you go. So all the
Hey.
conventions in Italy,
Although
contact
If
real
I
Italian
ever
food,
run into you, one of these days, I'm going to run into you at a con. We're on different ends of the country, and that's a problem. But I'm going to make it happen
I'm in a
someday, and
different
I'll buy
country.
you a slice of pizza.
And he was
ah,
just here. He was just here,
are
and
you
I missed him.
you're in like you're on the East Coast, right?
Yes, yes,
Okay,
Virginia,
so yeah. Oh, so say again?
Virginia.
Yeah, in Virginia. Oh, okay. Yeah.
And I'm in Toronto.
I don't know. They haven't booked me for any Virginia shows, so I don't know. But I'm gonna be doing I'm coming up next week I'm in Calgary
Oh,
while everybody else is at C2E2. I'm like,
that's farther for me, but it's still in Canada, so it's good.
yeah, yeah, that's true. That's true. I
Yeah,
loved Toronto. Toronto was
yeah.
great.
I'm
And
glad you had a good time, because that
and I'm
makes
gonna
me
be
happy.
I think I'm doing Boston. That's an exclusive. Fan Expo Boston. I think I'm gonna be doing that soon.
Well,
Uh,
I've gone to Baltimore before, so one of these
well,
days, if you make it to Baltimore, I
I
might
want
be.
to go to Baltimore. Absolutely. That would be great.
It's an awesome con.
Isn't that where they do the Ringo Awards?
Yeah, I think so.
I think
That's
so.
not an. I shouldn't say it's awesome con. It is an awesome con.
Oh,
Yeah,
I see.
I don't want
yeah. We
to
don't want to get
confuse
sued
people.
by the creators of
But
that convention.
I'll also be in San Diego and New York as per usual. So which those are like home base those
Yeah,
shows.
yeah.
So that's where when we'll see. Hopefully more will pop up. I'll be
Awesome.
out there.
Well, I
I
hope
want to get overseas though. I'd love to get to Italy when the Masters of the Universe Revolution prequel comic starts coming out on May 15th. Um,
Shameless plug. Do it.
Shameless plug.
Let's do it.
I
Yeah.
I hope that, by the way, I think they just pushed back Alan Scott 6 to the same day. I think they both
Oh,
come
well,
out. I
there you
think
go. You've got
Masters
two.
1, Revolution 1 and Alan Scott 6. Last issue and first issue, I think are coming out the same day.
Right. So there's
Um,
no shortage of Tim's
I think
work that
I
day.
don't they didn't tell me, but I saw it online and I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Um, but anyway, I want to get overseas, especially with Masters of the Universe. It's
Yeah.
so big in like the UK.
Yeah.
People love Motu in the UK and in South America, and I'm just like, send me. I want to go.
Well,
It rejuvenates me. I love it.
well, I'm glad you enjoyed your convention here. We hope you enjoyed being on the show, and maybe you'll come back during the release of the Motu prequel. If we can get you back,
I
that'd be
hope so.
awesome.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah. Adam, I have to tell you though, I had some poutine for the first time in my life in Toronto.
did you enjoy it?
I think I was sent to the wrong place.
Okay, I probably
It was
depend.
it was not everything I'd hoped. And I won't name the place,
Mhm.
but I
You can tell
do
me when
have
we hang up, so they won't get
some
offended.
Canadian friends who are going to, when I'm in Calgary next week, promised me they're going to take me for the real deal,
Yes,
and I will not
yeah,
be
yeah.
disappointed.
Well,
So,
I'm sure you won't with the real stuff. I'm sure
good.
you'll enjoy it. But
Excellent.
By the way, I
that,
need to ask. So, when you go on trips and stuff, do you do action figure hunting?
Oh yeah. In fact, when I was in Cleveland just now, there was a bunch of stuff I wanted
oh,
and that I don't get to see normally on shelves. And I was like, oh, maybe I should pick these up. But sometimes, like, my collection's so big, and sometimes my husband buys things and I don't even know. And
mm,
so, especially if it's Marvel. So I saw some Marvel Legends that I was like, I don't think we have these, but I couldn't get him on the phone. I was like, it was the last day I was there. And I was like, oh, I don't know what I should do. Should I pick them up? I should probably just pick them up. I should have just picked them up, but I didn't.
Is that
So
the new
that's
X-Men waves?
lesson
The X-Men
learned.
97
I'm
ones?
only missing
Oh,
Wolverine and Rogue. I can't find Wolverine and
darn
Rogue.
it.
I heard those sold out quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. But we managed to get all the other ones, and that show's incredible.
It really is. It really
Yeah,
is.
it's incredible. I'm
but
so jealous.
it's so good.
And also I picked up some Lego minifigs for my best friend as
Right.
well, who's a big Lego
Yeah.
collector. So I love getting out when I can onto the show floor
That's
and
awesome.
doing some shopping.
That's awesome. Well, we're glad you had fun in Toronto. We're glad you had fun here. We thank you for coming on. I know you said you sort of left Twitter, but is there any social media or anything you want to plug
Yeah,
while you're here?
you can link to my socials off of timsheridan.com.
Okay.
And handy links like to my books on Amazon if you want to buy some stuff there, but get them at your local comic shop if you can.
Will do.
And so yeah, I'm on Instagram and Threads. I love Tim Sheridan. And
We
and
certainly
I'm on
do
Blue
here.
Sky.
He's we're friends of Tim Sheridan here, so
That's right.
And yeah, and on Blue Sky as well. So, you know,
awesome.
I'm always on those things, and I'm always talking about where I'm going to be, when I'm going to be signing and stuff. I think I might be doing a thing out in California for a free comic book day. I'm going to go to a shop that I haven't been to before and do some signing there. So I'm very excited to meet some new folks.
Awesome. So find Tim there at those links and follow where he's going to be next and his great work both in comics and in animation. And Tim, again, it's been an honor to interview you. Thanks for coming on. We had a
thank
blast.
you so much for giving us your time. We appreciate it so much. And like I said, I'm honored. I've watched and listened to you so much over the years. I'm like, you know, so I'm just glad I was able to
you've heard 70% of these stories that I've.
It's okay. We'll listen to them.
So sorry.
You know, it's all good. It's all good. But
yeah, listen, honestly, really appreciate it. You guys are great, and I really enjoyed having this chat. I'm sorry it's so long. Hopefully, maybe you'll be able to cut it down and do a shorter version for people because my God, no, I hope nobody. I hope they're listening to it on 1.75 or 2 speed if they're listening.
No, I'm sure our viewers and listeners will enjoy it. And again, hopefully we can have you back again soon. But until next time, so long, everybody.